Hello and welcome to Peace is an Action Verb podcast. I'm here with Ellen Davidson, my dear friend, who describes herself on her website as a mother and an author and a grandmother. And Ellen, would you please introduce yourself too?
Hi, thank you for having me, Christine. And uh, yeah, I'm also a tree listener. I spend a lot of time in the woods with the trees, and I've written a book about that and other books for kids. And I have a grandchild now, which she's 2, and that's incredible. So.
Amazing how time flies. I remember when she was very, very little.
Mhm.
So yes, Ellen, in my own nervousness of introducing you, I left out that really important part, which is that you are an author, and peace verb storytelling is definitely one that I want to explore with you, as is tree listening. And so in the time that I have known you, you have written 2 of those books that you of the several that you've written in that time period I've known you. And The Sacred Path to the Wild Heart, yes?
Wild Path to the Sacred Heart. Yeah.
Excuse me.
It's close. It works.
The Wild Path to the Sacred Heart, you wrote. I mean, I don't want to put too many words in your mouth. I want to just invite you to describe it. As I remember, it was a channeled experience from your trees.
A
Can
lot
you?
of it was what happened was I was meditating a lot for over a period of 6 years with um, a lama in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, and he suggested that we follow the Jews. That coincided with my youngest daughter going off to college, and so I started playing with myself. What do I want to do today? And I had all these ideas of what I should do, not the least of which was saving the world. But what I really wanted to do was go to the forest. And so I had permission, and I went and I went and I went. And at one point, I was sitting with this tree, and the tree communicated to me to come back. And I was so surprised, and I wasn't sure I believed that. But then I did come back, and I thought I'd come back once, maybe a few times, and then it turned into this giant love affair. And so now it's been, I think, almost 13 years that I've been on this, spent huge amounts, like 3 days a week, averaged over 13 years, 12 years, off mostly alone in the forest with the trees. Alone because I'm more with, it's quiet, and I really become there. But sometimes with other people, and my one requirement there is that we do some silence, so that because humans, we love each other and we want to know all about each other and what our lives are about. So a lot of times we can be in sacred spaces where there is a lot of potential to really connect deeply with nature, but we'll miss it because we're human oriented and we're fascinated with each other. We love each other. So I started that odyssey. It took me it took about 6 years to actually write this book. And I didn't want to write it. I'd written 4 other published books. Those books were conventionally published. And it's kind of a lot of writers will say this, it's sort of a difficult industry. And an example is one of my books had won awards, 2 translations. The publisher went out of business in 2008. And instead of like taking off, it is just sort of like fizzled. And there was just so many disappointments like that along the way that I was ready to throw the towel in. And then I was sitting meditating at these trees, and this book was coming through, and I kept being told over and over again that I needed to write this down. And it was more like nature intelligence wanting to reach out to people. And I'm certainly not the only one. Since that point in time, so many people have been coming up with similar messages and ideas because they're trying to reach any receptive human. It's my firm belief that when we open ourselves to receive and really listen to the guidance of nature in every form. That could be science, and the close observation that science involves. But when we open ourselves to receive that intelligence, I feel that nature can guide us into restoration of ourselves and our world that will seem magical and beyond our wildest expectations. And I even have real world examples of where that's already happening.
Wow, Ellen. So this is I am feeling sitting here listening, sitting here with you over the Zoom technology. I'm feeling this peace coming in, a quietness, and I'm sensing tree branches reaching out through you to me. And and I wanted just to pause for a moment because there were some peace verbs that I heard in your storyline here. One of them was to give and receive permission. So you had a wise teacher in your life, the Lama, who gave you permission to play and explore and connect with yourself in terms of what do I want to do today. And then you received an invitation and you accepted the invitation, and the invitation was from the forest, from the trees, and then you put yourself into a place of receptivity by being in silence and returning. And so there's so many verbs there, right? There's the being in silence, the returning, the listening, the accepting the invitation. and there seems to also be a partnering. Could that also be a verb that I'm intuiting here? The partnering between you
Absolutely.
and the natural.
Absolutely. I'm really feeling the sense sometimes of the trees, the forest, the intelligence of the elements and the elementals wanting to just speak through me. So a lot of times, like when I'm allowing that, it's just allowing myself to be open, relaxed, clear, and not have any preconceptions of what I'm going to say or what frequencies are going to come through. The transmissions are for me as much as anyone who receives them.
And it feels to me like it might be about allowing yourself to resonate with a wavelength or energy frequency. Could I be onto something there?
True. Absolutely. That's brilliant, Christine. Absolutely. And that's a human capacity that's available to all of us. And I feel like our nervous systems evolved within nature of various sorts, depending on where our genetic ancestry is on the planet. Many of us evolved with forests and with trees. And there is a way that being in the presence of trees, and especially for me, I'm so blessed to be able to be in ancient, millions of years old growth forests that have been intact. And so the energy field that's built up in those places is holy, it's numinous and palpable. And but when we're in the presence of trees and nature, there is a way that our nervous systems our electrical systems, it's not just the nervous system, it's our whole energy fields, comes into a resonance, and it's very calming. And that's why all those studies about forest bathing that say that it lowers cortisol and blood pressure and increases T cells and immunity and speeds wound healing and relieves anxiety and depression, that's all true. We come into kind of a frequency resonance by being in the presence of nature, of trees. And it's important probably for everyone, no matter where they are, to have some contact. That could actually be with houseplants or with a pet or a window box garden. I mean, it can be with whatever is available where any of us are.
So it's sounding like you said houseplants, window box garden, and pets. So in other words, our non-human relations.
Exactly. But we're starving for those connections and for those relationships because we've gotten cut off, we've created a pretty human sort of artificial world, even though ultimately nothing's artificial because it's all Mama Earth.
It's all, isn't that the most amazing thing about it? So you and I are talking to each other with an image of each other in front of each other and hearing each other. And we think, oh, this is a computer, but it's all Mama Earth. It's all part of the intelligence of the universe.
Right.
And I lost. Oh yes, would you please hold up the cover of your book again, because my brain is not holding on to words, but I want to. I want your help there. Wild Path. No, very good, very good. Wild Path to the Sacred Heart. And so I'm with Ellen D. Davidson. Thank you, Ellen. Wild Path to the Sacred Heart. So I'm hearing you speaking of a finding one's path into the right, I'm going to put words to it. It's going to be approximate. The right relation, the coming home, the resonance of wonderment and truth through connection with our natural relatives, whether they're in a forest that's been evolving together for millions of years, as you are able to visit, as you are able to be present with, or as you mentioned, with houseplants. And I'm sitting in a room with a collection of friends here. So it's a pathway you're describing. It's a process of following a pathway, which is, I think, a peace verb.
Yeah, absolutely. Well put. And I'd like to add that nature is so full of beauty. Indy Ari, the amazing songwriter and singer, has a song where she says, let's sit back and watch nature put on her show. Constant show. And some of the beauty of nature's art is the full immersion that we experience. It's sensual, where we smell, we are caressed by the air, hear the sounds of birds or water, or so it's very visceral. And there's something deeply relaxing about connecting and being in and immersing ourselves within that constantly changing beauty that's so elaborate and intricate and interconnected. And relaxation's really important. However, it can be come by, because some of what I feel is distressing the world that we're co-creating is that we're running around like chickens with our heads cut off. We're so frantic. We're constantly being bombarded by things that are pretty horrible. And it's imperative for each one of us to find those moments and places where we can relax and really touch in. None of us can solve all of this. And moving from a place of peace within, peace in our own hearts, allows us to know what we can do in our next step and do it in a peaceful, balanced way. And nature can give us that unity consciousness.
And so you mentioned peace within one's own heart and unity consciousness, and the state of being that we find ourselves distracted into, of the motion without that connection to the stillness. And because I heard I was holding on to a question while I was listening to you, and I was thinking, well, where does one, a human being who finds oneself running around like the chicken with the head cut off, where does one find one's inner still true heart? And then you talked about the connection to the unity through nature. And then you also talked about sensing as a peace verb through multiple senses. And so you talked about, what our body can do, we can feel the air on our skin, we can hear the water, we can maybe have our toes in the creek. We can see the dappling light, we can smell the moist soil coming up into our nostrils. And there was another type of sensing you were talking about earlier, which was, well, it was, I think two, they probably are related, but there's that sense of peace that pervades when you are in that sort of an environment and you can have all of these bodily sensations coming to you, but there's also an emotional sensation of calm and deep contentment uh, that comes and so there's that sensation. But then we started this conversation with the accepting of the invitation. So you perceived, you listened. I want to say I'm looking at, I actually, just for your sake of where we are right now, this is the peace verb wall.
Wow. You've been busy,
This is
Christine.
that was 2017. That was where this all started. I was listening to peace verbs, and I was overtaken by the activity of putting them on this wall. So one of those verbs is, well, go upward and go within, pray, meditate. And so these are word approximations for what I'm hearing you say, which is some way of getting into a space that is outside of the clutter of the daily to do coulds and shoulds, into this informational pathway that's coming from, we call it higher, but we're also now talking about earth. So is that not beneath our feet? Is that not all around us? So I'm curious about the words we can put to this for describing that deeper, higher connection, which is also under our feet and here around us.
It's probably on your wall, but I have another word to add.
Right. That's part of one of the
Dance on the wall, because dance is so brilliant for getting us out of our heads.
dance is on the wall.
Mhm. But there's another word that probably is already on your wall, and that is belonging.
Oh, to
We
belong.
belong. We belong to the earth. We're part of her. Wherever we find ourselves, we are experiencing air and water, and maybe we're pretty far off the ground if we live in a high rise, but the ground is there, and we're given life by the energy of the sun. And so we're all living within the spacious body of our beloved planet, our Mother Earth. So all of us do belong. We all are connected. It's not trying to create that reality, because that is the reality. It's a fundamental reality. It's a truth. It's relaxing and calming and slowing down and quieting. And sometimes the slowing down can be dancing really fast.
Interesting.
It
Okay.
gets us present.
Okay.
Anyone who has meditated probably has the experience after breathing and just quieting and going within and slowing and entering our heart chambers, our heart space with our energy, of drinking a glass of water afterwards and really appreciating that water. So appreciation is a peace word. And gratitude and belonging. And
So
there's so many ways in, but nature is around us wherever we are.
Ellen, can you help me tease out the elements of to belong? So you were talking in the same explanation about slowing down and relaxing. And is there something there that's also letting go of fear?
Yeah, because actually fear is, well, I've suffered anxiety. I know what that's like. And having kids didn't help me. There were a lot of things to worry about,
For sure.
But fear actually does jack us up. It's really wind up energy. It speeds our heartbeat and our pulse, and it makes our skulls tighten and our breath shallow and fast. It disconnects us from ourselves. And some of what we fear, some of what I have feared. And so in this process of relaxing and letting go of layers of fear, has been my feelings. So in the relaxing and the slowing down and the centering into our hearts, some of what we have been afraid to feel will likely come up. It certainly has for me.
Oh, fascinating.
So in that, what I was running from feeling, the betrayals, the hurts, the feelings of worthlessness and inadequacy, or just what's going to happen next, all my worries, because, and especially I've found for sensitive people, imaginative people, which I'm one of,
Mm,
we can sense all the probabilities of where things could go.
right.
Sometimes
Right.
that's good because it gives us the cues to prevent and head a different direction.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's ruining the present. And even though things are scary right now with what we know about climate change and some of the huge issues we're all facing, we don't want to miss our lives right now. And there's still an awful lot of beauty to be worshipped and a lot of people to love and animals, and we don't want to miss all that because we're afraid of where we're headed. But at the same time, we also want to take the caution of knowing that and doing everything we can to go a different direction. So fear is a gift, but it's not a place we want to live
Mm,
constantly.
mhm.
And settling in and really allowing myself to feel the grief I felt, the grief over, I've already lost places I really love and have known, and they won't be back in my life. They've burned.
Right.
Um, allowing myself to, instead of running from that grief and getting busier and busier and faster and trying to fight harder and harder to prevent, allowing myself to pause and sit with that grief, I found to be heart opening and heart expanding. And then more, my theory about the universe is that it's made out of love.
Oh, I love that theory. I'm going to join that club.
Right? So everything that exists is a creation of love, of this incredible
Oh,
cosmic dance of love. And allowing myself to feel what I felt, which sometimes was fear, anxiety, grief, despair, all those feelings, has expanded my capacity to receive this constant pulse and heartbeat of love that is the very fabric within which we live.
oh my gosh, Ellen, there's so much for me to tease out from what you just said. I'm like almost bursting with excitement over all these different things. So, oh God, okay. So if the universe is love, and love is a noun, an intangible noun, very much like peace, very related to peace, and yet somewhat different. The universe is made of love, and yet there are these moments of what we would say are difficult feelings, the ones that we hold inside of our body, hold inside of our memories, locked away as we're running around being busy in the ways that we make ourselves busy. And that, so for describing the pathway back to unity consciousness, which is that consciousness of the universal love that is all encompassing, that there's these these emotions that then come back up to be, is the verb witness, are we witnessing the emotions as they come?
That's
A-
one.
and then also
Feeling. It's okay to feel.
feeling is a peace verb.
Right. Is it on your wall?
It's, well, here's the fun of this activity of interviewing all of you peace actors, is that I don't have space on the wall, but the list is going to expand. So on the virtual wall
Yeah.
there's definitely going to be more peace verbs. um so we're allowing ourselves to feel. And and so there's also something about, maybe if you could slow down with me and describe a little bit more closely, maybe we'll take grieving, because that was the verb you were just talking about. When you allow, when you settle in, when you get quiet, when you give space, when you feel, how does that process then in that moment move through you? Is it that it comes and it does it wash over you? and then subside? What is that experience?
I think I'm going to explain a little bit about a typical tree day,
Oh, okay,
which
good.
is okay. So, I, all the old growth, I have an old growth redwood in my backyard that came to me in dreams at the beginning of this odyssey about 30 years ago. And, but where I live, the old growth forests have been cut down. So I have to drive 40 minutes. It's a beautiful, easy 40-minute drive to get to the forests that are intact. It's past the ocean and lagoons. Usually on the drive, I'm full of thoughts of what's going on in my life and
Mm,
things I need
mhm,
to solve, things I need to do,
mhm.
maybe upset, maybe I'm mad at my husband. He didn't do what I wanted him to do, all those things. And then I get to the trail and beauty captures my attention.
Mm.
There's birds, there's butterflies, the trees are huge. And as I walk, and walking really helps settle the nervous system. So as I'm walking down the path, I'm becoming more and more present, more and more calm, more and more settled. After about, usually I go about 4 miles. After about 4 miles, and I have now a dozen trees that are deep friends. I
Mm.
found trees have different responses to us, and some are really eager to interact with humans, and others are doing something else. They have a
They have a
lot,
different to-do list.
right, but
Tree type of to-do list.
right. So I have the ones that seem to be receptive to me sitting. So then I sit for about 2 hours with a tree, and there's a deep settling.
Mm.
A
And this is after you've already had that kind of letting your brain be noisy in the car.
Mhm.
And then 4 miles, how long does that take? Is that like a 2-hour walk?
Yeah, it's about 2 hours for me. I'm not fast,
So 2 hours of the meditative movement of walking
right? And the
and the
silence
listening.
and the tuning in. I'm not always silent. I run into 5 mountain lions. They scare me. I have a bear bell, and if I get that sense that there's lions about, I see paw prints or I see scat or I hear one, then
Yeah.
I start making a racket. So sometimes I sing, and it was really fun to open up my fifth chakra, let my voice out, and no one around for miles and miles. So I could really, that was fun. But, and then I'd feel like I was creating a symphony along with all, there's the sound of the creek and the birds and the screak, screak, creak of the old trees. And so it almost felt like a composition. It was really fun. But then at the tree, I will say the first thing about feeling deeply that would come up for me would be resistance.
Mm.
I would settle and I would breathe and I would finally get in, and the feelings would try to come up. And then I think, well, maybe I should go for a swim now. Oh, it's time to eat lunch. Oh, I want to get it. I'm not comfortable. My neck hurts, And so that's what would come
Ah,
up first was
yeah,
resistance.
yeah.
And I didn't always, sometimes the resistance would win. But
Mm.
but I did this over so many years and for such a long time. Eventually, if I just would keep breathing and allowing myself to be antsy and tense and not worry about it, but just sit, stay there, I'd start to feel. And for me, the grief would sometimes come through, really through the back of my heart, all the way through like a wave. It would come in waves and it hurt like
Mm.
pain, and
Mhm.
tears would be coming down but no one was watching me. I had the freedom. I didn't have to like buck up. I didn't
So there's like a being held by the forest, being held by the tree, and not being witnessed. So sometimes to witness is a peace verb, but you were actually not being witnessed by other humans and thereby could witness yourself or really fully
yeah,
allow,
feel
give
what was in there.
give permission.
Uh-huh. And what would come up next after the tears flowed and the heart opened, and a lot of times it was wordless, and a lot of times I didn't like even have to pin what verbally. I didn't have to analyze or figure out what the grief was about. I know what the griefs are in our lives right now anyway, and they're pretty collective and shared in a lot of ways. But sometimes I would go there and figure it out, but sometimes I would just let it be and
Mm.
breathe and feel. So what would happen next after that heart opening of feeling the grief that was there was pretty much always joy. It was like the holy wellspring of joy. It was like this crystalline, pure, bubbling wellspring. It
Mm.
felt like holy water, and it would cleanse my heart and come through and be the elixir of life, you know?
Oh my goodness. Yes.
So it
Yes.
was worth it. So then after that, I became less resistant and less afraid to feel, because I knew that what was underneath my grief or my anger, or my fear, was this absolutely precious, crystalline beauty.
And so thank you for slowing down and giving us the full journey of a day with the trees and you were talking earlier how we don't all have to have access to the majestic old growth redwoods to be able to follow a similar path. And so if we were just to distill the typical path for you, there's the allowing oneself to have the cluttered thoughts, so that's the driving. Then there's the walking, which is the physical activity in a meditative sort of a way. So some people ride their bike, some people walk, some people run, some
And
people swim, dance.
yoga's great for this.
Yoga. So there's a connecting with the body, and then there's the sitting in stillness with your natural friend, with your teacher, with your maybe tour guide. There's a lot of different ways one could describe the trees in terms of how they're providing a space and a supportive presence for you. And then there was the wave, the allowing and the experiencing of the wave that came through your heart from the back. And so I think you're talking about your heart chakra, but that's somewhere, it is related to, but not exactly the same as your physical heart. So maybe you're feeling the pain from your back. I have my hand on the back of my, between my shoulder blades, coming through towards the front. Would it fill out all the way? Was it unidirectional?
You know, I that's one way it happened. Sometimes it could just be right in the center of my heart, or it could come um, through the front. I think the important thing here isn't so much directional as it's the awakening of the heart.
So maybe it's more that you were actually just really aware of and listening to and aware of and allowing your mind's eye to be with your heart, or your presence and attention to be with your heart, and then to allow that grief to pass through and to not even have to name it or attribute it to something, and then to discover that there's this infinite crystalline wellspring. Like we have in our collective mythology the concept of the well of eternal life, the water, the crystalline light-giving water that is forever replenishing. So to access that, it's just such a reassuring end to a story, the story that never really ends. But if we're just talking about the day in the life of and the process of being with the trees and allowing this to happen, it's so reassuring. Thank you for sharing that journey with us.
Well, thank you for asking me. It was fun to clarify it in words. And I have to say, um, I believe this is totally available to all of us. And there's ways, even indoors, with house plants and plants and herbs and rocks and crystals, to create a space that supports maybe really soothing music. There's music that helps us go into. So the main point might be, I'm still exploring this. I don't know. I'm just one of all of us who are exploring this, right? There's lots of us.
Yes.
But
Yes.
in this exploration, I'm wondering if like humans went off track a little bit in this separation thing. We thought we were something different from nature. That's in our history. We thought
Mhm.
we were supposed to have dominion over it, which is false. We're part of, we're not in control of. And although we influence and we are influenced by, but that's,
Those are wonderful distinctions. Thank you.
yeah. I'm wondering though, if like our separation has come more from that mental plane, from the head level, which I don't dishonor. I mean, we have a lot of comforts in our lives as human beings. It's amazing there's 8 billion of us on the planet. I mean, how did our species even do that, you know?
Right.
So we've done a lot of that with our minds and this concept mind over matter. But I'm wondering if the connectivity, so we can be guided by the larger intelligence of the whole, is something that we're going to access more through our hearts.
Well, my heart says yes. And because my mind and my heart are friends, my mind is going along with that concept. Um, and I think also there's something about allowing ourselves to evolve, and to grow, and to allow there to be a heart evolution and revolution. And I see in those words that those are both related to the spiral effect. Evolve. There's a rotation involved in that word, in the word itself. And yes, I think that there's something very special and important about that, in being in peace. And Ellen, if you would like to explore this other topic with me and tell me if this feels like a part of our conversation today, um, in my process of observing you as my friend, as an author, I got to see the tail end of your first book. Not first, hold up the page again, because my brain is not doing the words. Wild Path to the Sacred Heart by Ellen D. Davidson. As you were writing this book, I was listening to you describe it as a transmission that you were receiving and allowing, and you were the conduit, and you were transported by the experience, and the peace was coming through you. So then I'd like to talk a little bit about wind, because wind, I thought I was still like, wow, my friend wrote a book, and then wait, my friend wrote another book. How did that happen so fast? So wind, from my outside eyes, looked to me to be a marriage of the heart and the listening and the intellect and the formulating, because I saw you feeling stories, but then also thinking through the details. And you were talking about, as sensitive people may have an ability to feel out into the various different possibilities. So if we're thinking about how the universe could evolve, that your mind is able to see, well, there's this pathway, and then you can bring yourself back, and then no, wait, there's that pathway, and you can bring yourself back and see how that storyline can change. And so as you were writing Wind, I felt like you were making some very loving decisions with your mind and your thought process about characters and about their relationships and about their even their physical characteristics, in a way that would be healing to the audience and also opening doorways of imagination. So I wanted to ask you, would you like to talk about wind?
I'd love to talk about wind. It's my new baby.
Yeah.
But wow, thank you for that. I hadn't thought about it that way. But it is more plotted. Wild Path to the Sacred Heart is a meander through the woods, and some of it is channeled, not all of it, but some of it was more like the trees transmitting through me, and I did my best. Not, it's a translation of energy.
Yes.
There's some of that in Wind. There's a forest goddess, Dania, and she appeared. I didn't calculate out who the characters would be. A lot of them just appeared. I'm not that self-disciplined.
So I think you're probably describing what so many authors, especially authors of fiction, are doing. That's the piece verb of the storytelling, is very much about, oh, okay, oh, hello, new character.
Yeah, right.
How are why didn't you show me how your story evolves? And so there is an awareness that populates in your mind, and then a playing, is that accurate way of describing? Do you play with that awareness then as the plot develops?
Yeah. Um, this book is kind of a fast page flipper, but there's this wisdom came through in the book that I don't really even know I have in me, but it would pop out in these characters' mouth, and I go, "Wow, that was cool." And there's also there's luscious natural settings, and uh, it does have an eco vision quality to it, and it's very uplifting and happy. It has a totally happy ending, which I love in stories, I have to admit. And so, but it was more plotted. I was definitely thinking in terms of turning points, climaxes, denouement, the whole thing. So
Mhm.
that was there. And sometimes writers are really familiar with, you write something brilliant and it doesn't fit in the book. So there were things I had to take out that I wanted
Mhm.
because they
Mhm.
fit into where the plot was going. But I don't even know what else to say about wind.
Well, I have some prompting questions for you.
Take it.
And so so in terms of the act of storytelling as a piece verb, there in the genre of fiction, especially fiction for young adults or for teens, for older children, um, to populate to help them populate their imagination with luscious ecology and wise characters and happy endings, and to give permission through the allowing of it to be a magical, maybe a modern day fairy tale. Maybe there's elements of magic in it, right? It's not just a story about the kids that go to school and their life on the city bus coming home from school. It's not just populated with our world as we see it. My sense is that you are creating new pathways for collective movement in the process of bringing the story populates through you, and so it's coming from somewhere in the grand reality of all, right, and then channeled through the written form to human brothers and sisters
Yeah.
and non-binary. I don't mean, you know what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say our brethren, our humanity, that then has a wider scope of what might be possible.
I hope so. I wanted to do that. I wanted to offer something. I felt like I had written a dystopia, a young adult dystopia, a long time ago, years and years ago. And I felt like we had enough of that. We're kind of living in a dystopia now. When I was writing it, people thought things were fine in general.
Mm-hmm.
People,
Mm-hmm.
I felt like the time has really come for visionary fiction. We need to find ways out, ways
Right.
that lead us back to what we want. And in the midst of this point in time that we're all in, that's been prophesied by all kinds of indigenous cultures around the world, from the Mayans to the Hopi and so on. It's a challenging time where there's the possibility of birthing a world that isn't based on endless wars and greed and imbalance. So we have a possibility of going a new direction. And I think a lot of visionary people are called in all kinds of ways to share how that might look. And this was an attempt for me to share part of how that story might look, where we could go. And I think that's crucial right now because it's important. When I was in the mountains recently with my family on a family vacation, I watched a bald eagle try and get this small sized duck that was sitting on the lake. And the eagle dove 3 times, talons extended, ready to get this little duck. And we're like, oh no, this is going to be so sad. We're going to The duck squawked and flapped and splashed and made a ruckus and a rumpus. And the eagle left, and 3 times the eagle tried and left. And finally, the eagle flew off to go probably catch a fish. And
Mhm.
the duck was fine. So we're in a time culturally and collectively where some flapping and squawking and splashing is necessary
Mm.
to, and I honor the people whose calling is to do that. And but at the same time as we're squawking about the things that are cannot be, I just heard a wonderful story about this young woman, Nalili, I forget her last name, who basically got a Los Angeles oil company that was making everybody sick with toxic. She got it shut down, and it was this young.
Oh my goodness.
So that flapping and
Wow.
squawking is absolutely necessary. I bow and I honor it. At the same time, though, some of our attention, a lot of our attention still has to be focused on what we want to create, because we do have to stop some of these egregious violations that are heading us in the wrong way, heading us away from life. We want life on our precious planet. It's beautiful here. It's unbelievable. How could this have even ever been created? The humor, the variety, the amazingness of it all is just astounding. So we want life on our planet in general. Anyone, I think, mentally healthy does, and emotionally healthy. So how do we go there? And I think that's where the visions come in and are necessary for all of us in our own heads, even in our own personal lives. Just thinking, just really, you know, a lot of people put up vision boards and things too, and you have a peace wall.
I have the peaceful.
Just where we want to go, and we want
Yeah.
to breathe it and feel it and sense into it. I think it was Martin Prechtel in one of his books talks about bringing the rain, and the way to pray for rain is to feel the rain as if the rain is already there.
There's so much. Okay, Ellen, do you mind if I pause? Because I want to
Yeah,
go
let's
back to the
pause.
story thread. Okay, so you said, well, I wrote a dystopian novel for young people. And so I'm hearing in that, and then now you're writing this utopian novel. So I'm hearing something about practicing right timing, which is also on the wall here. Is that at a time when everyone thought everything was okay, the dystopian novel was a cautionary tale to say, well, wait a second, you know, in that process of imagining outwards into the potential realities, look at this potential reality trajectory that we may be on right now. And is that where, if we have a collective choice, is that the choice that we desire to make? And then, so here we are, we're at a different place in the fabric of time. And so now to practice right timing in terms of what is that story that could be healing, that could provide potential opportunity and collective imagination, is now a utopian story. And the importance of the element of story in giving us a sense of hope and agency, and how we co-create. You talked about co-creating earlier, that we are co-creating our reality here together, and to belong to the earth. And that you were talking about, the other author who was saying to feel the rain on our skin is to call it in. And so there's this time weaving, I'm going to throw that out there as a potential piece verb, of the practice of using the imagination through not just the images, because we're so sight oriented, but also the visceral feelings. And we were talking about visceral feelings and being in nature. And so to allow the visceral feelings to inform us of what the world that we want to live in feels like, looks like, behaves like. And then you were talking about the duck and the eagle. And here I am, someone who's been vegan and is now a carnivore, and thinking about, I love eagles. I really love eagles. Oh, I love ducks. I really love ducks. Oh wait, I love fish. And so who am I rooting for?
There was that, we had that conversation in the mountains. Who were we rooting for? The eagle has the right to to be fed, to eat, to survive, as
Yes.
the duck. And inherent in this, on this planet where we live, we eat and we're eaten. And there's also a metamorphosis in that we change form. When we eat something, it becomes part of our life force, our energetic system. And so that's a transformation. And there's always this arising and dissolving and metamorphosis into new forms. That seems to be an inherent quality of life on Earth here.
And I'm wondering if, Ellen, one of the things that we might be running from, that if we stop into that stillness and we allow ourselves to feel, is the grief of being the eaters. If human beings are primarily, we are an apex species, right? We're like the eagle, we're like the bear, we're like the
Mhm.
the orca, whale, and we're carnivores. And maybe somehow finding peace is about allowing that grief wave to move through us in this beautiful energetic field of Mother Earth where we eat and are eaten. I don't know. I'm just hearing,
Yes,
these
I hadn't
elements in your
thought,
story.
I hadn't thought of it like that, but we have fear of being eaten, and then we do have grief of eating. And even if it's just a carrot, the carrot isn't getting to be a carrot anymore. It's part of us. And so I I think our grief is over impermanence.
Oh, wow. Wow, because you were talking about the transformation and the becoming something new and the dissolving and the coming into form and dissolving and coming into form. And so perhaps the peace verb is surrender,
Yeah,
acceptance.
acceptance. And just relaxing into what is arising, what is real, what is now, and knowing that there's no, I get very attached. Especially when there's little periods when my life feels all together. I've got my ducks in a row and everything's working, and
Right, right,
very attached to that. And the truth is, it never lasts. It
right.
will dissolve and reform into something else. And it's like going down a river. There's these placid places in the river, and it's just, oh, you can say, well, the next thing you know, you're in the rapids again.
Mm.
And that seems to be pretty typical for our lives. And so there's a balance. I think it's about balance. And I said this in a different podcast, but nature knows balance.
Mm.
Balance is not static, it's a constantly reforming homeostasis that takes in all the current conditions and rebalances. And it's amazing how well we do that a lot of the time. When we're scared, we get rigid and fixed, and we try and keep things in the same structure. Collectively, we're now at a time when the earth says the same structure of Western civilization of constant increasing growth and consumption doesn't work. It has to collapse or we won't survive. And then the earth will go on and evolve new forms. But this biosphere is exquisite. Who knows how many eons it would take to get another one of these, if ever. It's amazing. So here we are with this precious biosphere, this precious earth. And we're attached to a system that we've created that doesn't work. And so it's the relaxation and the letting go of those attachments and being open that we could create completely different lifestyles. And some people are already doing that. I know a woman, Peggy Lou, who's creating is part of a group of people creating a sustainable community on Oahu in Hawaii. And it looks amazing what they're doing. So people are doing that. A lot of us don't have the wherewithal to leave the lives that we're in right now. And so we're straddling two worlds. Our hearts want simplicity. And I believe what humans really need is we need each other, love, art, music. We need the wild animals. We need beauty and beautiful places in nature that we can be in. And we need healthy food, clean air, and clean water, some shelter, some clothing. But a lot of what we have right now, we don't actually need.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, we're not even happier for it because this is not one. This nation consumes maybe the most on earth. I'm not sure anymore if we are still the highest consumers, but we're high, but we're not the happiest.
Right. Aren't the Bhutanese the happiest in terms of
That's
the
what they say. Or they debate between them and the Danish, and you know, there's
oh
different.
yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
but so simple, a simpler life that really addresses the real human needs for community and for care and things seems to work better for us anyway. So
But it seems like you're describing a hopeful path. You're describing a so if, I think if we were to come back to the central piece verb of this conversation, it could be relax, relax.
yeah.
And and then you were pretty excited about dancing too. So I don't want to leave dancing out as maybe one of the central verbs here, but relax.
Well, dancing can be the way to relax. You know, when I was meditating a lot with this lama, he would say, "Meet yourself where you are." So if you come home from work, don't expect yourself to sit and go into a deep meditation right off. Turn on some music and dance for a while, decompress, unwind, do whatever it takes, you know, then meditate.
So there's a allowance and an acceptance and a self embracing of wherever it is that we find ourselves.
You know, absolutely. Like allowing allowance, that's a great piece verb. And allowing all the parts of ourselves. There's a system I learned called voice dialogue, and it was really cool for me to see that I have this voice that was, you know, crazy, neurotic, blah blah blah. But that's not me. That's just one little part. That's one voice inside of me. But what we tend to do, because we try way too hard. We're trying to be perfect, and we're trying to, you know, there's a lot of body image stuff for a lot of especially young women, trying to have what society tells us is the perfect body, and it's driving people crazy and making them not love themselves, so it's toxic. But we're trying so hard, we're trying to be good, we're trying to be loving, we're trying to be compassionate, we're trying to say the right thing. In a way, that's almost a violence against ourselves, because we're shoving down so many parts of ourselves that if they just have room to be heard, to be felt, to be breathed, then we liberate more energy into our beings that's repressed. It's in all of our tight muscles, and some of the illnesses we manifest is all this stuff that we're not letting ourselves be conscious of or accept. And we didn't get into this predicament we're in collectively by the parts of us that are all peace and love and blah blah blah. You know, it's important to acknowledge and feel the angry part and the hurt part and the scared part, and just give them some breathing room, because then they aren't driving from the back seat. We all, most of us, have those moments where we've lost our temper, or we just don't know what came over us, and all of a sudden we're like flipping out and not being ourselves. You know, where did that come from? Well, those are those parts.
So as I bring a deep breath into my body, breathing is actually an act of exchange.
Yeah.
So you're allowing these parts of yourself to breathe is really actually allowing them to engage in that process of transmutation or change, because when we breathe, we exchange.
That's so brilliant. Thank you. Wow.
And I'm listening, right? I'm listening and
Yeah.
and hearing you say that. And what's fun for me as I engage on this journey of the interviews is to find these common threads, and allowing is definitely one that's coming up. this concept of allowing.
Yeah. And accepting ourselves exactly where we are, exactly where we are, you know? And there's just so much more energy available when we do that. And that is that exchange of breath. It's also the hard, knotted, tense places in ourselves when they're accepted, when we hold ourselves tenderly like that,
Mm.
then there's room for them to dissolve and, as you said, transmute.
And I'm thinking, you're talking about that, and I have some experience with this very same thing of the finding of the traumas that are stored actually in a muscle or in a sinew, like a physical location in my my body. And something about that seems like, we were talking about the fear of change or the fear of dissolution, and that we put up an obstacle to flow. We put up an obstacle to that exchange and that dissolving and rebuilding. And so actually when we find these places inside of ourselves through the meditative relaxation process that you're describing, or similar processes, we're actually physically creating an opening on a cellular level where toxins that have been inside of that group of cells are now releasing into the bloodstream, flushing out through the kidneys and being cleansed by the liver. And there's movement where there wasn't before. There's water. You were talking about the river of life. There's water that gets to parts of our physical river system that hadn't been flowing there. And I think of when you're around a river, there's the main flow that things are moving rather quickly, but then there's also these back eddies where water stagnates, or maybe there could be a puddle off to the side where there was a flood, but now it's dried and it's not connected to the river. So there's a similar process that's happening inside of our own bodies. And we have agency in bringing that flow back, is what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah. And this gets back to the intelligence of nature. And most of us know Emoto's work now, and that water is incredibly receptive to music, words, and will change the crystalline structure. That includes the water within our own bodies.
Amazing.
And so we can purify and then resonate. And then that opens the possibility to resonate at higher, well, not higher exactly, but at clearer, perhaps.
Oh, that's an interesting, different way of putting it.
Right. So then when we can resonate at different frequencies, different information comes in and different possibilities come in.
Oh, wow. So there's a connection to the storytelling
Yeah.
there, that the potential stories are more expanded, and there's more opportunity. And I'm having a hard time putting words to this, but I'm hearing you're talking about when you get clearer, and it reminds me of that wellspring of crystalline life force water energy that you talked about discovering in your heart, that then there's more information coming through.
I think so. I really, I really feel like the subtleties of the energetic realms are an avenue that we can work with. That when going to the trees, okay, I'll go back to that. Going to the trees changed my frequency and my vibration. And the vibration's a little more connected to the emotional body. But anyway, it calmed me down, it elevated, it expanded my perceptions and my senses too. And so I would feel quite altered. I mean, there's a way, we all have those moments where the colors get brighter.
Mm.
So when I would get up from the tree and leave, I was really there in the forest, really seeing and really hearing and smelling and sensing, and everything was alive and vibrant. And it's always that way. It was just my perception that changed. And we all have that capacity too. There's things that make us dull, and there's things that make us more alive.
Ellen, when I woke up this morning and I was thinking that I was going to be having this conversation with you, and so I was already tuning in, starting to connect with you, and I put my feet on the ground and I went, "Oh," because I could feel my feet on the ground, and I was like, "Oh, this is delightful." And then I walked into the kitchen, and I kept feeling just the delight of my feet on the ground, and I believe I was starting to feel some of this energy that you have been receiving in your walks with the trees, and just the more alert, the higher level of alertness to your surroundings.
Yeah. And that's a constant. It's not a state, a fixed state for me. It's a practice.
And
And
and and so, but I wanted to, because the reason I brought that little vignette from my day in is because it's not just about you.
no,
It's about you're radiating into your community. You're radiating into the heart space of the people that you know and that you are interacting with. And so when we take what may, you know, one could say, "Oh, that's selfish to spend all that time," right? But that's like the chitter chatter, lower vibration kind of thing to say. But what's really happening is that there's a transmission that's now available through you to other human beings because of this allowance that you've given yourself.
I've only recently, I thought it was all going to come in the books, which, I still struggle to sell. Sometimes they do better, sometimes worse. But I've only recently been feeling that energy, that transmission beginning to come through me from the trees, which is interesting because after I had my first baby, I had been an elementary school teacher before that. And I had a baby and I wanted to stay home. But it had such low status back then. And I felt very insecure. And people were asking me what I was going to do now, all kinds of people. And I had never worked harder. Having a baby was a big deal for me. And so I did a Sanaya Roman guided meditation to find my career, So because I couldn't handle being around kids all day at school and then taking care of that, just wasn't going to work. So I wanted something that would work with my new circumstances. So I did this guided meditation, and a beautiful emerald green jewel was put in my throat.
Oh,
And I was told in this meditation that I was supposed to speak for the earth. And I was like, how am I going to do that? I care about the environment. This is a long time ago. It's 35 years ago now.
yeah.
And how am I going to do that? I care about the environment, but I can't picture myself on some kind of talk circuit. And I never, ever, ever could. And divine timing is, we're back to timing again.
Yeah.
Timing is different than how we think it should be. Because here it is now, 35 years later, and I have done maybe half a dozen podcasts now that just kind of arose. I didn't try and have that happen.
They came to you, right?
Right. And I do find I have a sense sometimes of speaking for the earth. So all this time later, it's sort of organically arising, which is part of the magic of this world that we're all living in together.
It is, and it's another one of those rememberings of reality where we can say nature doesn't always move fast. Sometimes nature moves fast, and so in terms of what is right timing within one's own being, that uh, holding hope, holding faith, and trusting, even when the river is, in the rapids time period, or maybe it's a drought. Like what I'm trying to say is, you kept a hold of that vision, and there were many, many years where it didn't make sense how that was coming together or whether that was coming together, and here it is, and there's a blossoming and a coming into being of that. life purpose, of that vocational life purpose.
I know. And I've struggled hard with the books. And I mean, and they've been good too, because there's a woman who's an environmental engineer from Harvard that was so inspired. The trees kept showing me a vision of green corridors connecting forests with each other together. She's getting grants, and she's doing something called forest bridges, where she got the idea out of that book and she's creating it. And I'm like, whoa.
Yeah, yeah. And so there's these connections where hopefully you will have many opportunities to see, sense, perceive, and receive feedback on the connections that you are making, on the tendrils of energy that are going out from you. And just the real simple, like, oh, my feet on the ground, I knew that was about talking to you and having a day starting with you. And it's a little fancier to hear about the academic who's now going to create pathways of forests, but it's all interconnected. And I can see how wonderful that is, how wonderful that there's a spark of the imagination of bringing the written form that you have presented your gift through, that people will pick up on the threads that are then their part, their gift, and how that's about how we are all interconnected, and how there is that, we like to talk about is it the mycelia? I forget which fungi it is. It's the mycelia, right?
Yeah.
That go between the trees and the plants and extend the network, and that we as humans are really actually a part of that, operating in much the same way.
Yeah, and more so all the time. And to have faith, whoever you are or wherever you are, that when we're following the call of our heart and we're doing our best in life, that is a positive nourishment going out into the whole. And sometimes we will be blessed by getting the feedback and seeing it. A lot of times we won't know. But a forest isn't about one tree. It's about all of the trees growing together and creating this incredible environment. And our healing is not going to be that old hero myth that that one Superman saves the day for all of us. It's over. That's not how it is now. What this evolution we're in right now is about all of us coming together and supporting each other in evolving and sharing our gifts, or holding each other in our dissolutions. As we nourish, our nutrients go back in the soil, even when we're a fallen tree.
Mm.
And we're a habitat for fungi and insects and stuff that all enhance the forest. So to really understand the beauty of the whole.
And there's something that it ties back to something else you were talking about, which I don't remember exactly at what point in the conversation, but allowing oneself to be humble and small in terms of, I hold this piece, this little piece right here, but that's my sacred job. And then that connects to this other person who's holding this little piece. And then maybe there's a person holding a big piece, but to give oneself permission to be that, whatever that piece is, whatever that, and I'm saying PIECE, that piece, that component, and that together we are. And you were describing, and we didn't talk about this, but you are actually also a musician. And so when you were first talking about walking through the forest and singing and perceiving that it was a composition, and there was in an orchestra of the trees and the water and the brooks and the birds and you. And so isn't that very much like what this is? It's an orchestra of interconnection, and the sound and the beauty together. What we create is different than the soloist.
Yeah, beautifully put. And so as we refine our selves and our interconnectivity and everything, the beauty of what we create as an orchestra coming together, it will be more harmonious, I hope. I did want to backtrack. You said something about it could seem selfish just taking off and going to the forest and blah blah blah, which really was an issue for me. I like felt really self-indulgent, doing what I wanted. And I think there's an element of faith here for all of us, where really tuning in to our hearts and letting ourselves be guided, we can have the faith that that will benefit the whole. It will be for the good of the whole. And just in a simpler way, my whole little family has become a lot happier and more harmonious.
Right, right. So instead of, any of us who are married and have homes have a to-do list, right? There's always like
Mhm.
some dishes to wash, windows to clean, carpets to vacuum, et cetera, or bills to pay. And so
Mhm.
when we choose solitude, when we choose an activity that has solitude, it's so encouraging to hear your story of how that then. It's a really interesting image that just came to me, the hunter gatherers in all of our past. If someone goes out into the forest but then comes back with what they've gathered, that you've done this energetically, that you've brought the bounty, the energetic bounty back to your family, and that your whole family is happier. And I think that's beautiful encouragement to anyone else who is feeling that inner calling and teetering between the should I versus the that inner joy that's calling.
Right. And women, particularly after thousands of years of patriarchy, have been conditioned that we always need to be giving to others and serving others, and we do it to the point of burnout. A good red flag is resentment. If we ever feel resentful about what we're doing, it's time to back off and do some self-care. There's even even in the midst of working and raising kids and stuff, we have choices. We have little moments when we could pick to do what would nurture ourselves. We might not have the vast savannas of time that I had at that particular point in my life, which was a real blessing. But even half a day on a weekend could be our day. And just to, we're back to that word permission, just to give ourselves permission to actually do what we want to do some of the time, you know?
And I'm sure I agree with you in terms of the way that our gender roles have been set up. And I think also the provider, the expectation for men to provide has got to have a similar burden and weight.
Yeah.
And especially when you were talking about, well, how much, what is the environment of happiness that we need to create around ourselves in some clothing, some shelter. And 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 so there's there's the invitation to permission to both the providers and the nurturers of our families, the invitation to permission to have that time for self and to have that time for following one's inner journey.
And a lot of people now are doing both roles. I know my daughter and her husband both do both, and still need some time for themselves.
Right,
Right.
right.
So
Wow, Ellen, we've covered a lot of ground.
thank you, Christine. That was a fun conversation.
Oh, thank you. Me too. I really enjoyed it. Is there anything else that any other peace verbs that you think we better sneak in here before we
I think
close?
what would be really a sweet way to end for anyone listening to this is just to go into our hearts for a minute and breathe and and I would like to invite everyone to really open to blessing, to all the blessings. Imagine yourself relaxing into the deep peace of being held in the arms of absolute love, loved exactly as you are right now, breathing, relaxing deeper sinking into our belonging to the earth and how much she loves all of the life that is her creation. And just breathing in. And I just wanted to say thank you for this beautiful interview, Christine.
Oh, Ellen, thank you so much too. You're welcome. It's been really fun, and I've been dreaming about having this interview with you for months. So thank you.
The timing was perfect. I'm home.
Yeah, it was. I was like, I didn't think I would catch you till after camping season. So it was
I know.
really great timing.
I know. So
thank you. Really wonderful to see you. Have a beautiful day and enjoy those camping trips.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.